Okay, hi. I'm Lulu Friesdat. I'm the Executive Director of Smart Elections, and this is a meetup that is going to focus on H.R.1, which is the For the People's Act, For the People Act, and it's a piece of legislation that has a lot of ambition to reform our elections and try to get some of the big money and corruption out of elections, and also make improvements to voter inclusion, and especially this particular group is interested in election security and the provisions to require voters the opportunity to use a hand-marked paper ballot, and also provide grants for improvements to election security. And we're really interested about the details in particular of that. And we have some very knowledgeable guests with us today. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to introduce, I'm just going to introduce all three of our guests, and then we'll turn it over to them. So we have Jana Morgan with us. Jana is the director of Declaration for an American Democracy. And I want to show you their website also. Let's see if I can get that going here. And the link to this is in the notes. So I became aware of Declaration for American Democracy, I think last year, and I was really stunned about what kind of an amazing process it is. They have over 170 member organizations now, and these are all pro-democracy organizations that are working for election reform. And I'm just showing you all of their, all of the different groups here. And one of the things that Smart Elections is really focused on is trying to create more collaboration between the election security community and the greater democracy reform community. In the past, the election security community has tended to work somewhat in isolation from other communities. It's a field that requires a lot of kind of dense research and sorting out a lot of details, some of them very technical. And in general, it's tended to work somewhat apart from other election reform groups. And I think it's really important that the broader election reform community become more aware of election security and the details of it, and that the election security community begin to work more with the with larger democracy reform groups. And so that's part of what this call is about. And so I want to give Jana an opportunity to talk about Declaration for American Democracy and how groups here might want to join. So Jana, I'm just going to turn it over to you. I have to say, I'm a huge fan of Jana. She's just doing such great work there, and she's such a wonderful leader. So Jana, do you want to go ahead?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for your kind words, Lulu, and for inviting me to this this webinar with all of your great members. I really appreciate the kind things you said about the Declaration for American Democracy. And so I'll just tell everyone a little bit about us. The Declaration for American Democracy is a coalition of over 170 organizations from the labor, racial justice, faith, environmental, women's rights, good government, and a host of other important communities who have all come together with a singular objective: to pass transformational democracy reform. Now, we came together in 2018 because we knew that during times of great calamity often come the opportunity for massive change. And it was clear from the corruption of the Trump administration that our democracy needs fixing. But we also know that many of the problems facing our system well predate the Trump administration. And that's why only a holistic and massive approach to reforms will be able to unrig our system to put power back into the hands of the people. And so we believe that H.R.1, the For the People Act, combined with H.R.4, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act, and D.C. statehood can do just that. And there are a host of other reforms that are partners and that we work on as well. But H.R.1 in particular will get big money out of politics, protect and expand access to the ballot, end partisan gerrymandering, and restore ethics and accountability to our government. And we've heard strong commitments from our champions in Congress, in particular Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer, that the passage of H.R.1 is going to be a top priority. And even President-elect Biden has said that democracy reform, like H.R.1, is a top priority. So we've been working incredibly hard to make sure it remains that way. For example, we had a nationwide activist training last night. We were joined by Representative Sharice Davids, so that our activists will be able to go and do in-district meetings in their states with their members of Congress and with their senators. Obviously, those will be virtual. And we're also planning a series of telepress conferences with our partners in key states for the second and third week of December. And we have a host of other great things that are planned for January, including stunts, petition deliveries, rallies, probably virtual rallies, meetings with members of Congress. We're going to be putting out some great video content, social content, posters. So we have a lot of interesting things planned to keep up the momentum on democracy reform. And so if any of you all are interested in joining the Declaration for American Democracy, we would love to have you. The main kind of requirements are, if you come on board just to support our mission and to support our objectives to pass transformational democracy reform. Happy to take any questions, Lulu. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So I think let's hold questions for the end, because we're really going to try to focus on H.R.1, and I want to get over to our experts. So what you can do, if you have questions for Jana, I would say put them in the chat, and go ahead and sign into that document that I keep putting into the chat. Put your name, the name of your organization, and yes or no if you're interested in finding out more about DFAD as, possibly joining the coalition. And then I want to move right on to our guests right now. We have Jennifer Ahearn, and also Jennifer is with their acronym is CREW, and I will show you their website. Let's share their screen. So this is Citizens for Ethics and
Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. You got it.
It's a very difficult acronym.
It is a mouthful. I have to say. Absolutely.
So it's great to have you here. And then we also have Ahearn Scherb, who is from Common Cause. And I think I pulled up the Common Cause website. What I actually am showing from Common Cause, which I'm very excited about, Common Cause is an organization that has done some really good election security work. In particular, in New York, they put out this white paper about the Express Vote XL, which is a voting machine that we're really concerned about. And so that's what I wanted to show about Common Cause. And Ahearn Scherb is the legislative director there. So Jennifer, why don't you get us started? And what we want to do is just find out a little bit about the basics about H.R.1 and some of the obstacles for its passage. And if you could get us started, and then I don't know if you want to tag team with Ahearn, if you guys have divvied up sort of what parts you want to talk about, and then we'll move to questions.
Yeah, that sounds great, Lulu. Thanks so much, and thanks everybody for joining. I think what makes sense is I'll try to give sort of a 30,000-foot view of the bill, since election security isn't really CREW's area of expertise. And as you noted, Common Cause has done great work in that area. And then I'll turn it over to Ahearn, and he can talk maybe a little more specifically about the various parts of the bill that address election security. So I'll just give the big picture. I think if folks know maybe one thing about H.R.1, it's that it addresses voting, campaign finance, and ethics, and tries to be really a holistic and comprehensive bill that is really powerful and transformational on all three of those things. As folks I think probably have experienced, that kind of approach to democracy issues, it would be pretty new, and often these issues of sort of come and go and move or don't move, on their own based on people's individual sort of interests and perhaps maybe even their perception of their self-interest, their political self-interest. And so, I think that one of the big efforts with H.R.1 is to try to put together a bill that is truly a broad democracy reform bill, and to keep all of those provisions together in the bill and as strong as they can be. So that was really, that's probably one very basic and important thing to know about the bill, is that it is comprehensive in that way, and the people who have sort of envisioned it really want to do everything they can to keep it that way. And so as you see folks talking about the bill, obviously there's lots of different parts of it, and different folks are interested in different parts, but you'll see, I think from DFAD at least, a lot of attempts to sort of really highlight both the comprehensive nature of it and to note how important it is that we address all of these areas of our democracy to really achieve the outcomes that we all want. So that's probably the one pitch that I would make to you all as a way to understand the bill is to know that about its history and about the interests of the folks who put it together. On the sort of campaign finance and ethics parts, I'll just note that some of the campaign finance provisions that are in there that are really critical are really major improvements to disclosure of campaign finance spending and additional requirements on that front. A transformational fix to the Federal Election Commission, which I'm sure you all know, they're sort of in charge of monitoring campaign finance and enforcing those laws, and they've been fairly ineffective for the recent few years, let's say. And so, so a major change to that agency and to how they do their work. On the ethics front, you have, a couple of major provisions relating to conflicts of interest, really touching on all of the branches of government, executive, legislative, and judicial, but obviously the executive branch and the presidential issues particularly are a big part of this. And you have provisions like requiring presidential and vice presidential candidates to release tax returns as part of the electoral process. So it's those kinds of provisions that really try to strengthen the conflicts of interest rules that exist in our government, and also, again, to address some of the enforcement issues, that are there to make sure that the rules that are in place are actually effective. So anyway, that's sort of the big picture overview of those two titles of the bill, and certainly happy to answer anybody's questions about any of that, but I know that's not the areas that you all are necessarily as specifically interested in. So happy to move quickly on from that as well. And in terms of obstacles, to the bill's passage, I think probably some of the things I was just pitching to you as its advantages also really can be the flip side of the coin and can make it challenging to pass, because it is a major piece of legislation, and those are always hard, no matter what. And, particularly pieces of legislation that, as somebody who's worked on, I've been the person who goes into congressional offices, and Aaron, you've done this too, I know, to tell people things like, you should really strengthen the bribery laws so that it's easier for your boss to get convicted of bribery. These are not the kinds of lobbyist visits that people are really excited about getting, let's say. But anyway, so anytime you're sort of advocating on these kinds of issues, I think, it's good to sort of think about the fact that that this is something that some folks are going to see as not necessarily in their personal interest in every situation. And so you're asking them to do something for the greater good. And, a lot of people are very committed to that, as folks may have seen, every Democrat in the House, over 200 of them in the last Congress co-sponsored this bill. So, they're very committed. There are a lot of people who are on the Hill who are very committed to this, but also, it's good to sort of have a reality check that doesn't make it an easy lift by any stretch of the imagination. So I guess I'll stop there and turn it over to Aaron and let him get into the details on election security specifically, and also to fill in any other parts where I missed it.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that overview. And then let me just ask you, in terms of obstacles, if the Democrats do wind up taking the Senate, if they win in Georgia, is H.R.1 realistically going to be a number one priority? And do you think it has a chance of passage?
I guess, maybe this is the lawyer in me that has to answer these questions this way, but it's complicated. We know from Senator Schumer that, as Jana mentioned, that, that they intend to prioritize this. But we also know, and we know that in the current Congress, all of the Democrats in the current Senate, supported the bill. So they're on record as being in favor of this. But also, they didn't really have the opportunity because, Majority Leader McConnell, never sort of allowed the bill to move at all in the Senate or to even get a vote. They haven't had the opportunity to engage, really in detail with like the text of what's in here and the specifics of the bill. And so I think it's fair to say that, that they would see it as a real priority, and that in the sort of broad strokes, they'd be very supportive of it. But, when you get down to the nitty gritty of actually legislating and actually moving the bill, I think, there's a lot of questions about sort of how that might happen and what changes might or might not need to be made, because the Senate just hasn't had the opportunity to engage with this yet. So I think, I don't know, Aaron, tell me if I'm way off base on that, but I think personally that's just sort of the reality of legislating and the reality of the situation that we're in. Does that answer your question, Lulu?
I think it did. Yeah, it sounds like it's a priority, but we know that it's going to face some serious obstacles when it actually gets the light of day. Like right now, it really hasn't been even discussed in the Senate.
Right. I mean, the Senate just hasn't really had the opportunity to do that. And also, I will say, they've got a lot of other things that are facing them, right? I mean, COVID relief, the economic stimulus, like there's a lot of things that for very good reason, are going to need to be the subject of a lot of their attention, next year as well. If they were to take either way, but if they were to take the Senate, there's going to be a lot of other things that are super important for all of us that they address, I think. So I think that's a reality of the situation as well.
And Jana, that's basically the Democracy Day 1 initiative is about really trying to make that priority happen. Is that correct? Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So the Democracy Day 1 initiative is basically kind of our comms effort to kind of demonstrate the groundswell of support from people all around the country that we think our democracy needs to be fixed, and it needs to be one of the first priorities of Congress and of this administration because it is so critical. And it's also critical to fix our democracy to get progress on the issues that people care most about. We see that we can't make progress on issues like the environment or gun violence prevention because of the stranglehold that money in politics has on our political system. And we actually wrote a report about that I'm happy to share, and I'll actually paste also our resources page into the chat, where you can see some of the posters, graphics, videos, and all the great things that our digital content creator Azor has put together for the Democracy Day 1 effort.
Right, so you're doing billboards, I think, and there's also been letters to the editor and a whole slew of social media tools that are trying to push this Democracy Day 1 concept, that this is really the #1 issue that we want to see the Biden administration tackle. So yeah,
Absolutely.
And if you could actually put those in the notes as opposed to just the chat, so that people, I guess both would be helpful, so we have that access to that going forward. So I want to introduce Aaron Scherb. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us. He's the Legislative Policy Director at Common Cause. And Aaron, are you able to start focusing now on the election security aspect of the bill? It does mandate that voters, let me see if I can get Aaron. I think, Aaron, if you say hello, you'll come up on the video. Do you want to say hi, introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Lulu, for inviting me, and thanks to everybody for being here, spending some time today. All right, could folks who aren't speaking, could they mute themselves? Or I think we're getting.
Yeah, let me see if I can mute everybody. Okay, so everybody's muted now, and Aaron, I'll unmute you.
I think I just did that.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. So as Lulu mentioned, I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs at Common Cause. We work on kind of all the issues within H.R.1, money in politics issues, voting rights and election administration, and ethics and accountability and conflicts of interest issues. As Jana mentioned, so there are a number of working groups within the Declaration for American Democracy Coalition. I co-lead the Hill working group, and then Jen and I co-lead the policy working group within DFAD, although Jen does 99% of that work, and I'm along for the ride. So I guess happy to comment about a couple of the provisions among within the election security components of the bill. As Lulu mentioned, it has a voter verified paper ballot requirement, which we see as significant. That's helps provide confidence and trust in our elections, that people's voices are counted and voices are heard for how they intend to vote. It also, Common Cause has also done a ton of work on risk limiting audits. And as I think Lulu mentioned, it also provides grants for states to conduct risk limiting audits. And those are a critical part of, again, in making sure our elections are safe and secure, and people have confidence in our elections. So I guess those are a couple big pieces of the election security components of H.R.1. I think to some of the other questions or some of the other comments about before, kind of why these are like married or interlinked. I think money in politics and elections and voting security are interrelated. as others have mentioned, for a number of years, we talk about them as like separate kind of siloed issues. But I think, as we see the Trump administration, especially, but also, congressional Republicans, like just, doing whatever they can to, it's kind of like two sides of a coin, injecting dark money into politics as a way to help suppress the vote and undermine confidence and faith in our election systems. So I think by kind of marrying these kind of separate, previously separate kind of siloed issues together, we can get all Democrats to kind of hold hands and work on these issues together, because for better or worse, we've got 535 campaign finance experts in Congress. We've got 535 voting experts in Congress. We've got 535 ethics experts in Congress. These issues are very personal to members of Congress. And by linking these together, it makes it more feasible to kind of get this done and across the finish line. And as Jana and Jen mentioned, all House Democrats co-sponsored and voted for it in March of 2019, and all members of the Senate Democratic Caucus co-sponsored this bill. And so the fact that they're on record initially for the first time, it makes it somewhat easier, hopefully the second time, to get this across the finish line if there's a more reform-minded Senate in the next Congress after the Georgia runoff races. Lulu, to your question about the kind of if Democrats win the two Georgia Senate runoffs, I think there's no party is going to have 60 seats in the Senate anytime soon. So I think there'll be we're all certainly aware of what Senator Manchin has said about his views on the filibuster. I think there's kind of a middle ground, if you will, to try to get something done without outright eliminating the filibuster.
So people here may not be totally aware of that, but maybe you can just explain kind of the logistics of this, the basic essence of how to get a bill through the Senate with only 50 votes is a complicated issue in and of itself. Yeah,
so it takes 60 votes to overcome a cloture motion and a filibuster. So I guess there are two ways to get that. You could either eliminate the filibuster rules, or you could pass something through reconciliation. It's kind of a technical process that I don't have to get into here, but reconciliation is a process used to pass the Affordable Care Act back in 2010. It involves, for bills that have, that affect direct revenue, you can pass something with 50 votes. And so, it's unclear how much of H.R.1 would fall within that bucket. And it comes down to the kind of the Senate parliamentarian ruling on that, but that's certainly an option that we're looking at as well. Common Cause has long worked on Senate rules reform issues. We actually sued then Vice President Biden in his role as president of the Senate back in 2011 to try to declare the filibuster unconstitutional. That is part of kind of a push to help overturn that or get that thrown out. So I think, there are other avenues to kind of reduce the cloture vote threshold over a number of days from 60 to 57 to 54 to 51, without eliminating the filibuster outright. So I think
So what you're saying, and I'm sorry, I just want to clarify that. So what you're saying is that there are some technical kind of parliamentary procedures available to the Senate that might help them lower the number of votes that they need without actually eliminating the filibuster.
Yes, those would have to pass with those would have to pass on a rules change in the Senate at some point next year if both Democrats win in the Georgia Senate runoff races, though. Yeah.
And then one of the real challenges that the Senate has is that Joe Manchin is a very conservative Democrat who often votes with the Republicans. And so they may not actually have 50 votes depending on, his decisions.
Yeah, I think, both he and Senator Sinema from Arizona have expressed.
I'm sorry, who's the other senator?
Senator Kirsten Sinema from Arizona.
Okay.
She's expressed some, hesitations as well about the doing away with the filibuster, as have a handful of other Senate Democrats. But I think, given that this would be a once in a lifetime opportunity to pass a comprehensive democracy reform bill like this, I think there'd be, even they're extremely frustrated with Senate Republicans' obstruction, and I think, I think something would definitely get done. The dam would break to some extent. Whether or not, I don't think it would be the full elimination of the filibuster to get something done, but there would definitely be something to to help get H.R.1 or significant parts of it across the finish line.
And what about the possibility of reaching out to Republicans? I know right now in this particular environment, the Republicans are very concerned about election security and have expressed a lot of reservations. Is there an opening there possibly for some bipartisan approach?
Well, so the House kind of, to that point, the House kind of peeled off parts or incorporated parts of H.R.1 into a couple separate bills that they had standalone votes on last year. One was H.R. 2722, the SAFE Act, and another was H.R. 4617, the SHIELD Act. It incorporated a number of kind of foreign attempts to kind of combat foreign influence in our elections and election security pieces, and as well, and those both attracted, I think, some minimal Republican support in the House. But as long as Mitch McConnell is the Republican leader in the Senate, there's next to no chance that he's going to allow anything, or he's going to keep his members in line.
Right. Well, I'm just saying maybe the landscape has changed. I know this community is very, very much in support of 2722, the SAFE Act. There's a lot of provisions in there that, in general, we're really excited about. It's a very detailed election security bill. So, and is DFAD kind of keeping its eye on 2722 and open to supporting that if that as a standalone bill can move forward?
I think our initial goal is to keep H.R.1 big and bold and strong, keep it together, do it early in the new Congress if the opportunity presents itself. But if it appears that there's an opportunity if that's a foregone conclusion, that's not going to happen, then I think yes, we're certainly open to other avenues, whatever it takes to get parts of it. But it's given that we're still focusing on Plan A for now, though.
Right. So let me just ask you a few questions. One of the questions I have is about the grants for election security improvements. So, and this is such a mammoth bill. I think it's hard for any of us to really read all the details of it, but this was one thing that definitely I'm interested in knowing more about. No, that's our notes here. So in this section, it talks about these grants that are going to be available to improve voting systems, and they have to be, they're the voting systems security improvements described in section 298A with respect to the regularly scheduled general election for federal office held in November 2020 and each succeeding election for federal office. So can you guide us toward that section 298A? Because I think many of us would like to know specifically what the election security improvements are. Sometimes our experience has been that the vendors try to really write the legislation and they make those security requirements really what they're interested in, as opposed to what computer security experts would be interested in. Are you able to guide us toward that, or maybe you can follow up with us about that?
So sorry, I missed it. Could you clarify what's the question again, or what's the?
Yeah, let me show my screen again. So, and this, I was just sort of going through this morning and looking for sections that I was more interested in more detail about. So this is in the section. In addition, there's a couple things that the bill does. The bill requires that the federal elections give voters an option to vote on hand-marked paper ballots. And I put that language actually into the chat. So that's one thing that I think we might like to know more about, because the devil's in the details with paper ballots. And we can circle back to that. But the question I'm asking about right now is one of the other things that the bill does is it offers these grants to states to improve their voting systems. So they have these grants for obtaining compliant paper ballot voting systems and carrying out voting system security improvements. And the way, as far as I can tell, that the security improvements are defined is that they want to carry out voting system security improvements described in section 298A. So I'd just be interested in looking at section 298A. I'd like to know what these voting system security improvements are.
Yeah, Lulu, you just have to scroll down a little bit in the bill to
Okay.
find the new language under 298A. And I know it's such a long bill and it's really hard to navigate. So you might want to control F 298A and until you can get to that. But you'll see there's a list of permitted uses in that new section. and then also some limitations on the kind of vendors or the requirements for vendors to who provide cybersecurity, and a couple of other things. So like there's some specifics there. I don't consider myself enough of an expert to know whether they're good or bad, but just to say that that language is in the bill.
So this is something I'd love input from some of the people on the call on. So it looks like
I can try to send a link directly to this, maybe. Let me try.
to this section.
Yeah, let me see if I can.
I just took a screenshot of it.
Okay,
and
great.
I can copy and paste it. Is it basically the surplus appropriation section? Is this the main section? If the amount of funds appropriated for grants exceed the amount necessary to meet the requirements, the commission shall consider the following in making a determination to reward funds. Oh, so these are the things that they're trying to get rid of here. So
voting system security improvements described is the beginning of the section that I'm looking at. This is the title of the section that I'm looking at.
There we go. Security risk and vulnerability assessment of the state's election infrastructure, which is carried out by a provider of cybersecurity services under a contract entered into between the chief state election official and the provider. So I think this is a section that most of us would like to kind of like take a little bit more time to look at. And just, so I'll copy and paste this section into our notes for people who want to take a deeper look at this. Qualified election infrastructure vendors described. See, one of the problems that we've had with our vendors is that they have not shown a strong commitment to security. And in fact, each new generation of voting machines that they're putting into the market often is worse than the last. So the new generation of voting systems that they're selling currently have major vulnerabilities, including the ability for the voting machines to mark on the ballot after a voter casts their vote. That's both Dominion and ES&S have new systems that do that. So just to kind of give you an example of how bad that is, if you vote on an ES&S Express Vote XL, it's a touchscreen machine. You put your, you vote on that touchscreen machine, and then it prints out your ballot. But it could print anything it wants on that ballot. After you've already made your selection, if it's under the control of malware, it could print a completely different ballot than what you've selected. And the Dominion ICE has a similar failing. And security experts have really been upset about this, to the point where they've said that the Express Vote XL and Dominion ICE are not auditable, not reliably auditable. And so we just want to make sure when we're looking at language that talks about election system vendors, that it's not the vendors who get to make those security requirements, because they haven't been reliable.
Yeah, I want to jump in here. I want to jump in here just to back up what Lulu has said. I've been in the election security business for a while, and the vendors really are. It's not just that they're not good partners. The incentive structure and the market structure, it's completely screwed up. It's not an example of a successful capitalist free market exercise. I mean, they're really, so attention, as Lulu is suggesting, to the role of the vendors and the power of the vendors is absolutely crucial.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I want to add that we've outsourced the counting of our votes to corporations. That is a fundamental problem in our democracy. At the state level, we have made election administrators dependent on personnel from these companies or their contractors. And these people are not sworn in any way to uphold the laws of the United States or the Constitution of the United States. Every election worker in every state takes an oath, but not these vendors. So we've outsourced to completely responsible, unaccountable people, and we don't even know how they're connected with the internet or how they're vulnerable when they're doing programming for our local election officials. This is a fundamental problem, and you've baked it right back into this bill. It's a horror story, really.
So, and I just want to let you know who has been speaking. Stephanie Singer is a doctorate. She's a consultant with Verified Voting and has also done research that's been supported by the National Science Foundation. That was the first speaker. And Jan Bendor is the director of the Michigan Election Reform Alliance, a group that's done terrific work in Michigan, actually getting provisions to eliminate gerrymandering there. So these are longtime, well-respected reform advocates. So I just want to, because we haven't really had time to introduce people, just let you know some of the people who are on the call. Jen or Aaron, do either one of you want to answer some of the questions that we're raising about the actual way that the systems will be improved based on the bill and the language in the bill?
I'm not familiar enough with it. I think, I'm certainly not an election security expert by any means, anywhere, I have a general knowledge. I'm somewhat a generalist and focus on all of Common Cause's issue priorities. But I put my email in the chat. So if you have suggested tweaks to language, there's going to be some minor kind of technical corrections to the bill. But the more it's changed, the more that makes it challenging to get support for continued support for it in the next time it's voted on, or when try to round up co-sponsors again. So I think there'll be some technical corrections and some minor tweaks, but there's not going to be a vast kind of rewriting of the bill. So
right.
Just to clarify, we certainly didn't write this. We provided suggestions. All of our groups provided suggestions and helpful input, I think. But we certainly don't have the pen for this. And getting some direct comments in the chat. No deadline for coming up with suggested tweaks, but the sooner the better.
That's great, Aaron. And we're not trying to put you on the spot. I think all of us completely understand that this is a very difficult road to hoe. If we had an easy path to getting good voting equipment, we would have done it by now. We've had this really bad voting equipment since 2002, and many of us have been fighting that. So we completely understand that there are a lot of obstacles to this, and we're not holding you personally responsible for the language in the bill or anything like that. We understand that you're colleagues and allies. But I think one of the things that we are trying to do, especially by having this meeting and by building these bridges, one of our frustrations has been that oftentimes these details are being written perhaps by people who don't have an intimate knowledge of kind of the history of what we've been through with the vendors and all of the iterations of just horrible security. In 2007, there was a report that came out, the Everest report, which showed how pretty much every voting machine in use in the state of Ohio, which is where the study was done, and those were systems that were used all over the country, were in fact horribly vulnerable. And this was a report that was it was requested by the Secretary of State of Ohio. It was an official study that was done by the state of Ohio and showed tremendous vulnerabilities. That was in 2007. When I went and interviewed officials in 2017, I think 10 years later, none of those vulnerabilities had been fixed. Even though that report had come out, they were still using those same vulnerable machines in every election. So there's a real frustration that the people who have the knowledge about this, the knowledge exists, but we need to loop them into the legislative process. And that's really part of what this meeting is about, is trying to build these bridges. Jen, do you have any, do you want to respond at all to just these specific concerns that people are raising?
I guess I was just going to say that one thing, as you all are thinking about sort of, legislative language and how to most effectively get that expertise into the policy process, which I think is, something that that's basically what I see my job at Crew is. So I really, I don't work on your issues, but I feel your pain a lot. And I totally understand, to some degree, at least what you're going through in terms of trying to sort of go to folks and say, like, we know what we're talking about, please listen to us and please do better. So I really, I understand sort of where you're coming from on that. And I guess I would say one thing that I might suggest is to try to think really hard about what role the EAC and the regulations play in addressing your issues. Like, at what level of the sort of process do your issues, can your issues be most effectively addressed? Because I think that's one thing that will help really make sure that your advocacy is as effective as it can be, because there are some things that are, because of the way the process currently exists, a legislative bill is not the right place to really address those in detail. And so you want to sort of figure out where in the stream you need to go. And so, I think the folks in Congress would be open to having those conversations, but I think, it's sort of one of those things where it's really hard to advocate, to say like, this is the problem that you need to fix, but you're not telling them how they can actually fix it. And they probably need to hear both of those things.
Right. So I think that one of the things about the EAC is that it is a completely toothless regulatory agency. It literally has no regulatory power. They issue voluntary voting system guidelines that the states can follow or not follow as they choose. And on top of that, it's an absolutely compromised agency that takes many of its technical instructions from the vendors themselves. They are so deferential to the vendors. Whenever they have policy decisions, they bring in a panel of vendors and ask them what they should do. And in this last round of the VVSG2, they only asked one expert, Philip Stark, into that process, and all of the rest of the experts that they asked on the panels that I saw were vendors. So that process is also very compromised. So I think one of the things we'd like to see is, and I've talked to Jana about this, and she says we have to put forward a proposal. We'd like to see an election security working group with the Declaration for American Democracy, with DFAD, and I think that might be one way that we could help to get some of this information into the pipeline. But I agree with you, Jen, that it is very challenging. I want to ask you one more question and then turn it over to our guests for more questions. One of the other issues that I've heard raised repeatedly about H.R.1 is that it makes it harder for third-party candidates like the Green Party to get on the ballot. Can either one of you address that? Is that still baked into the current version?
Are there specific provisions or specific lines that you could point to? I mean,
I searched for it and couldn't find it. I know that previously there was a provision that the amount that had to be raised for matching funds with the Green Party was $5,000. And I had read that that amount in H.R.1 got raised to $20,000, and that the Green Party was very concerned that they weren't going to be able to make that and that it would knock them off the ballot in multiple states. The Green Party, for the record, has been very, very good on election security. It was Jill Stein who filed the lawsuits in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. And they actually, I see Jan shaking her head no, but they are going to get access to forensic analysis of the voting machines in Wisconsin because of their lawsuits, which is something that no one else has been able to do. So I think it is, and even whether you believe that or not, it's concerning to have third-party candidates' lives made more difficult. So Aaron, you're not sure about that?
I just did a quick Control F search. I didn't see anything that jumped out right away. I'm not doubting you, but I didn't see anything quickly from just like a 10-second scan.
Yeah, I don't think that there is as far as I know, there's not a sort of a separate provision that says, third parties have a different set of rules that they have to play by. So, I can imagine an argument that some of the rules might have a disparate impact on them, but I don't think it's because of the way of the bill, of anything inherent in the bill that says third parties, it should be harder for third parties to do this.
They're not raising the amount of matching funds needed. They're not raising the bar to qualify for matching funds. Is that something that's happening in this bill?
Well, I mean, the matching funds program, we're not. It's not just tweaking an existing matching funds program, right? So I don't know exactly what you're comparing it to. So I guess that would be the first question: is in comparison to what?
I think what I read a specific article that said that previously the Green Party had been able to get on the ballot and get matching funds with by raising $5,000 in a given state, and that amount was going to go up to $20,000 based on the previous version of H.R.1. So, and I heard that from multiple sources, actually, that concern about the Green Party or other third parties having a harder time because of H.R.1. So maybe it's something that people on this group could research and look into, and we could come back with further questions for that in the future. So maybe it's just something that we need more information about. I'm going to go ahead. I appreciate you trying to field that. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions. If people have questions, I'd love it if you would just go ahead and jump in. If we get too many people, I'll start a stack, but go ahead and just unmute yourselves. If you could identify your name, the organization you're working with, and your question, please. I'm going to start with one from Eileen because she went ahead and put it in the chat. This is Eileen Nakamura. She works with Coalition for Good Governance. She says, what is the best way to get legislators to understand that the best technology for secure voting we currently have is hand-marked paper ballots with robust audits, that we do not need vendors for a fair, secure voting system?
Yeah, it seems to me like everybody thinks technology is the way to go when it comes to voting. And from our perspective, Coalition for Good Governance is actually suing the state of Georgia because and we actually got the old DRE systems to be deemed unconstitutional. We're trying to do that with the current paper ballot producing BMDs that are in use right now. But as you know, all this stuff is happening in Georgia right now, and even the Republicans who wanted this system are now, because their guy lost, they are now questioning the validity of the votes that they just cast on this system. So, you know, it seems like this is the time to really bring it to the legislators and tell them, we don't need machines. Putting a machine between you and your vote is the worst idea possible, because there is no such thing as a secure machine. There is no such thing as an unhackable machine. It can always be manipulated. And so, you know, we start with the premise that the safest way to vote that we know of right now is paper ballots with robust audits. And it seems like if legislators can understand that, and that is the only way that we can know that a voter's intent is on that piece of paper. One of the problems we have with the BMDs in Georgia right now is I touch a touch screen, a printout comes out. I mean, Jean and I, who's also on this call, we watched hundreds of hours of voting in the polling places. I can tell you that 99% of people will not look at their paper printouts. They don't. They just don't verify the printouts. We're not conditioned to do that, right? If I write a doc on my word processor, I print it out, I don't go and think, oh, there's going to be some mistakes in there. We're just conditioned to think that the printout is going to be an accurate reflection of what you put in, but that's not the case with these computers, because they are hackable, because they are prone to errors, because there could be just errors from programming.
Right. So let me jump in here, yeah. Eileen, and just clarify. So what Eileen is talking about in terms of legislation in particular is the language. Often in the bills, it will just say paper ballots. And if you have a piece of legislation that says paper ballots, how the vendors have interpreted that is that they can have a touchscreen machine that prints out really what's just a list of candidates. We don't consider it, election security community does not consider it a ballot because the voter hasn't marked it themselves. It's a machine generated paper ballot. We need to clarify, of course, that voters with disabilities need ballot marking devices, and that's very important for them to have them. But when you move to the larger population voting on touchscreen machines, and the vendors are allowed to say that that machine is producing a paper ballot legislatively, that complies, we run into some real deep security problems. And it also is bad for the taxpayers because they wind up buying these very expensive machines that are basically like $5,000 pencils. So it really comes down to how these are really like devils in the detail kind of specifics. How do you define, is the difference between voter verified and voter verifiable turned out to be really important, because voter verified means, did the voter actually look at it? And we know, as Eileen said, often they don't. Voter verifiable turned out to be a very vague phrase that wasn't very useful. And paper ballots is a very vague phrase that isn't very useful, whereas hand-marked paper ballots is a phrase that has turned out to be useful. So again, do you want to address sort of how we get into the details with legislators?
Yeah, and Aaron, just echoing this, the language in the bill and the way you described it is so familiar to those of us in Georgia, where the vendors have conflated voter verifiable with actually voter verified and brought in the RLA to say, oh, look, it's real.
And
So
RLA is a risk
this
limiting.
language in H.R.1 smacks of vendor-written propaganda that's been repeated over and over again to those of us here in Georgia, and it's just wrong.
So, so I guess one suggestion for, because there'll definitely be some tweaks. So I guess my suggestion would be to all of you for this coalition is to come up with like one kind of unified, to the extent possible, like, updated suggested language for this section. Try to get everybody on the same page, do like a red line with with what you'd like. And then, happy to share that with the relevant folks who are, in charge of, making the tweaks to technical corrections to H.R.1. Just keeping in mind that it's, they're getting this on many fronts. Like this is a, one part of a 700+ page bill. And so, they're all, they're critically important provisions in there. So it's, they're beyond overwhelmed, to say the least. So I think, this is, to the extent to make it as easy as possible for them would be extremely helpful, and just to streamline it so they're not getting kind of multiple, because they're getting this on every single area of the bill, for every single provision or every single line. And the way it's written was very kind of every comma was there for a reason, and it was a kind of a careful threading of the needle. So I think to the extent that you all are able to come up with like an agreed upon suggested language, and red line, that would be extremely helpful. And then happy to share that.
I think
Lulu?
Ruth, go ahead. That's a great suggestion, Erin. And I think what I'd like to do, if people are in the notes, can you please, Alejandra, could you start a section in the notes that says a working group for H.R.1 red line, and anybody who is available and interested to work on that, could you please put your names there? And we can hopefully try to do that. We can just even do it by email, because I know everybody is super, super busy right now, but I think we could break up sections and try to get that to them as soon as possible. And then I think, Ruth, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I did. And this is just to add to the examples for Common Cause, and also for anyone, probably everyone on the call is up to date on election lack of protection. But just to give example from LA, well, first of all, nationally, I'm sure everybody knows, but in case somebody didn't, or Eric or whoever, the software is proprietary and not open source, and nobody can find out about the software. So that's a major problem. In Los Angeles, our registrar bought $3 million worth of these machines and ballot marking devices. And I'm sure he was wined and dined, as everybody knows, goes on to get these kinds of lucrative contracts. But the problem was that when a technical report was done, it had 43 faults, and 7 of them were outright fails, meaning the machines should not have been used. The problem was that report came out in December of 2019, and the previous summer, the registrar had sent, his minions around to all these organizations to tout the machines. And then on top of that, had a mock election in November, so that quote unquote everybody could get used to the machines. And
so Ruth, thank you so much. I'm going to I think that those comments are well placed. I actually think it was 300 million that the
that's right. It was
registrar spent on the system in LA. But this is just to Ruth, we need to move on. I'm sorry, we just have 3 minutes left. But put your comments into the chat, please, and thank you for bringing that up.
Okay.
I think what Ruth is just pointing out is that even between the vendors and the election officials, we often see these very cozy relationships that do not wind up benefiting the public. That system in LA that they invested 10 years and $300 million in caused, I think, 2 to 3 hour lines in LA. Their electronic poll books malfunctioned. It's been a huge, huge boondoggle. And so this is the kind of thing that
Lulu, can I
yeah.
actually make just a twist point on that, which is
Yeah.
like one other thing that you all may want to think about in your advocacy, because I think one thing that makes legislating on this from Congress's perspective different from legislating on some of the other parts of the bill, frankly, the campaign finance and ethics part specifically, but other things they legislate on, is that states and cities and other localities really have a major role in making these rules, right? as you're noting, right? It's, city councils and, all manner of people in all different places. And so making really clear to them what role Congress can play and what impact they can have by their legislation, I think will be super important, because, like if you sort of go to them with, at least I've had this experience as well, like this is a generalized problem, what they want to know is like, well, what effect will what we do actually have, and how can we know for sure that it will have this effect, because there are so many other parts of the process, right? So I think I would encourage you to sort of think about that in terms of when you're making suggestions, making it clear how that works as well. Because I think
that's
those are really
absolutely
important.
great point. And I know that Aaron has a reporter call, so he's going to jump off immediately. So I want to take a minute. We've been pretty critical with our questions. I want to take at least 1 minute to say that overall, my sense of H.R.1 is that it's an amazing bill that addresses a lot of things that many of us would like to see, such as getting money out of politics for to some extent at least, to make progress on gerrymandering, to really get paper ballots in use, hopefully hand-marked paper ballots to a larger degree. So I think there are many, many strong provisions here, and we all really appreciate your efforts on this, how hard you've worked, that you've been willing to come here and meet with us and go through the nitty-gritty details. We're incredibly grateful to you. So thank you both so much. Do you have any any last parting thoughts? I'm going to let Aaron go first because I know he has to hop off the call.
Just thank you again for inviting me to join, and I think this is like this issue is one is critically important. I just say in terms of process, like this is repeated across every single issue throughout the bill, and so there are many folks who have it's not perfect. No part of the bill is perfect by any means, but it would be a huge step in the right direction, and so there are constant improvements that we can make. I think just trying to streamline the process as much as possible and getting like one unified suggestion for updates is just to make it as simple as possible for the relevant staff who are working on this would be extremely helpful. And again, we're happy to share that with them once you all come up with that.
I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And I think people in the chat are suggesting some information that they're interested in you reading, things like problems with risk limiting audits and things like that. They're kind of technical things, but we'll put together a list of, the working group will put together a list, a red line, and also a list of suggestions. Thank you so much for joining us. Jennifer, do you have any last words that you want to leave people with?
And I guess I would just thinking of it from a sort of a bigger picture strategic perspective, just for, another thing for you all to sort of consider as you think about how you do this is, H.R.1, it may be that you can't get the major changes to H.R.1 that you would like. Like that is, I don't want to sort of sugarcoat this for you and suggest that that you can necessarily persuade Congress to do this. But I will say my experience has been, including with the bribery suggestion that I referred to earlier, by the way, that when you make these suggestions and when you put these ideas out there, you never know when the opportunity will present itself in the future for them to come up. And so I hope that you don't feel like you're sort of shouting into the void on coming up with your suggestions, because my experience has really been that it's hard to know what is going to happen 6 months from now on the Hill and what opportunities will come up. And I particularly think that as somebody who is we don't work on these issues, I will say that I'm a little bit odd because my husband is a former CIO of a defense contractor, and he's really interested in this election security issue. So we talk about this at dinner all the time. So I'm weird, but at the same time, I just want you to know that that sort of the hand-marked paper ballot issue and the voter verification issues, like those have reached me. Those arguments have reached me, and the sort of general approaches that you all are talking about, I think are sort of in the conversation, at least as I have experienced it, even even though I'm somebody who doesn't really work on these issues. So I'm not sure if that, I'm not sure how much that helps you really, but I just kind of wanted you all to sort of walk away knowing that, that you are being heard, you know, at least to some degree, and it, you know, it may or may not, you know, work out exactly the way that you hope it will, or as soon as it needs to. But you know, we are sort of all working in that direction, and I hope, you know, we can continue to work together to make improvements. So
that's fantastic, and we want you to know, we want you to become someone who works on these issues. We believe, and it's true, voting security is a corruption issue. There just is a great deal of potential corruption in that community. The relationships.
So much corruption in that community. Jennifer, we can talk if you want.
So we think that you can and must be working on these issues. We're very excited that your husband is already informing you about them. You have a lot of fans on this call. So many people in the chat said, crew, thumbs up. We love that organization. So we're very glad to be in touch with you and look forward to working with you future. Hopefully some people signed up for the working group, and everybody save the chat. If you want to save it, you just click those 3 dots in the bottom right-hand corner and click Save Chat. Then you'll have all of our notes. Also, the notes will be available to everybody on Google. Everybody has access to that Google document. Thank you so much for joining us. Please stay in touch. Sign the Smart Elections mailing list. If you want to be in touch with us, it's contact@smartelections.us. I'm going to put that into the chat, contact@smartelections.us. And the best way to stay in touch with us is to sign up and come to our forums every other Tuesday night. That's how we keep you in the loop. Thanks to everybody for being on this call and for all the informed participation. This is what democracy looks like. Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.